The Universal Carrier, also known as the Bren Gun Carrier from the light machine gun armament, is a common name describing a family of light armored tracked vehicles built by Vickers-Armstrong and other companies. The first carriers the Bren Carrier and the Scout Carrier with specific roles entered service before the war, but a single improved design that could replace these, the Universal, was introduced in 1940. The vehicle was used widely by British Commonwealth forces during the Second World War. Universal carriers were usually used for transporting personnel and equipment, mostly support weapons, or as machine gun platforms. With some 113,000 built by 1960 in the United Kingdom and abroad, it is the most produced armored fighting vehicle in history. Design and development. The origins of the Universal Carrier family can be traced back generally to the Carden-Loyd tankettes family, which was developed in the 1920s, and specifically the Mk6 tankette. In 1934 Vickers-Armstrong produced, as a commercial venture, a light tracked vehicle that could be used either to carry a machine gun or to tow a light field gun. The VAD-50 had an armored box at the front for driver and a gunner and bench seating at the back for the gun crew. It was considered by the War Office as a possible replacement for their Dragon artillery tractors and took 69 as the Light Dragon Mark III. One was built as the Carrier, machine gun experimental carrying a machine gun and its crew. The decision was made to drop the machine gun and its team, and the next design had a crew of 3, a driver and gunner in the front, third crew member on the left in the rear and the right rear open for stowage. A small number of this designer's Carrier, machine gun No. 1 Mark I were built and entered service in 1936. Some were converted into pilot models for the machine gun carrier, cavalry carrier and scout carrier the others were used for training. The Carrier put the driver and commander at the front sitting side by side. The driver to the right. The engine was in the center of the vehicle with the final drive at the rear. The suspension and running gear was based on that used on the Vickers light tank series using horsed-man springs. Directional control was through a steering wheel. Small turns moved the front road wheel assembly, warping the track so the vehicle drifted to that side. Further movement of the wheel braked the appropriate track to give a turn. The hull in front of the commander's position jutted forward to give room for the Bren gun to fire through a simple slit. To either side of the engine were 2 areas in which passengers could ride or stores be carried. Initially, there were several types of carrier that varied slightly in design according to their purpose: medium machine gun carrier, Bren gun carrier, scout carrier, and cavalry carrier. However, production of a single model came to be preferred and the Universal design appeared in 1940. This was the most widely produced of the carriers. It differed from the previous models in having a rectangular body shape in rear section, with more space for crew. Production of carriers began in 1934 and it ended in 1960. Before the Universal design was introduced, the vehicles were produced by Aveling and Porter, Bedford Vehicles, the British branch of the Ford Motor Company, Morris Motors Limited, the Sentinel Wagon Works, and the Thornycroft Company. With the introduction of the Universal, production in the UK was undertaken by Aveling Barford, Ford, Sentinel, Thornycroft, and Wolseley Motors. By 1945 production amounted to approximately 57,000 of all models, including some 2,400 early ones. The Universal carriers, in different variants, were also produced in Allied countries. Ford Motor Company of Canada manufactured about 29,000 vehicles known as the Ford CO1UC Universal Carrier. Smaller numbers of them were also produced in Australia, where hulls were made in several places in Victoria and by South Australian Railways workshops in Adelaide, South Australia. About 1,300 were also produced in New Zealand. The United States of America manufactured Universal carriers for Allied use with GAE and GAE V8 Ford engines. About 20,000 were produced. Operational history: the Universal Carrier was ubiquitous in all the theatres of war during the Second World War with British and Commonwealth armies. From the war in the East to the occupation of Iceland, although the theory and policy was that the carrier was a firepower transport, and the crew would dismount to fight, practice differed. United Kingdom The 7 mechanized divisional cavalry regiments in the BEF during 1939–1940 were equipped with the Scout carriers, 44 carriers and 28 light tanks in each regiment. There were 10 Bren Carriers in each infantry battalion in the same period. The Reconnaissance Corps regiments which replaced the cavalry regiments in supporting infantry divisions after 1940 were each equipped with 63 carriers along with 28 Humber Scout cars. Universal carriers were issued to the support companies in infantry rifle battalions for carrying support weapons. A British armoured division of 1940–41 had 109 carriers in total. Each motor battalion had 44. The British carrier platoon originally had 10 universal carriers with 3 carrier sections of 3 universal carriers each plus another universal carrier in the platoon headquarters. Each universal carrier had a non-commissioned officer, a rifleman and a driver mechanic. One universal carrier in each section was commanded by a sergeant and the other 2 by corporals. All the universal carriers were armed with a Bren light machine gun and 1 carrier in each carrier section also had a Boy's anti-tank rifle. By 1941 the carrier platoon increased in strength to contain 4 carrier sections and 1 carrier in the carrier sections also carried a 2-inch mortar. By 1943 each universal carrier now had a crew of 4, an NCO, driver mechanic and 2 riflemen. The Boy's anti-tank rifle was also replaced by the PI-80 anti-tank weapon. The universal carrier's weapons could be fired from and or outside of the carrier. A carrier platoon had a higher number of light support weapons than a rifle company. To allow the universal to function as an artillery tractor in emergencies, a towing attachment that could allow it to haul the Ordnance QF 6-pounder anti-tank gun was added from 1943. Normally the Lloyd carrier, which was also used as a general utility carrier, acted as the tractor for the 6PDR. Australia Universal and the earlier Bren carriers were used by Australian Army units in the Western Desert Campaign. Variants. The widespread production of the carrier allowed for several variants to be developed, manufactured and or used by different countries. British variants Pre-Universal, Carrier, Machine Gun No. 2 to 1937, Carrier, Bren No. 2, Carrier, Scout Mk1, Carrier, Cavalry Mk1 to 50 built by Nuffield, discontinued with reorganization of cavalry light tank regiments of Mobile Division, Carrier, Armored Observation Post, Carrier, Armored, 2-pounder, Carrier, Armored 6-pounder, Mk. The original model. Mk. 2, equipped with a towing hitch. Wasp, a flamethrower-equipped variant, using the flamethrower, transportable, No. 2. The Mark I had a fixed flamethrower on the front of the vehicle fed from 2 fuel tanks with a combined capacity of 100 gallons. 1,000 produced. The Mk2 had the projector in the co-driver's position. The Mkic had a single 75-gallon fuel tank on the rear of the vehicle outside the armor protection, allowing a 3rd crew member to be carried. Praying Mantis. The Praying Mantis was an attempt to produce a low-silhouette vehicle that could still fire over obstacles. A one-man design based on Cudd and Lloyd's suspension was not adopted, but the inventor was encouraged to design a 2-man version. This version appeared in 1943 and was based upon the Universal Carrier. The hull was replaced with an enclosed metal box structure with enough room for a driver and a gunner lying prone. This box, pivoting from the rear, could be elevated. At the top end was a machine gun turret. The intention was to drive the Mantis up to a wall or hedgerow, elevate the gun, and fire over the obstacle from a position of safety. It was rejected after trials in 1944. A Mantis survives in the Tank Museum. Australian variants Carrier, Machine Gun, Local Pattern, No. 1, also known as LP1 Carrier. Australian production similar to Bren Carrier but welded in some minor differences. Universal Carrier MG, Local Pattern No. 2, also known as LP2 Carrier. Australian-built variant of the Universal Carrier. Also produced in New Zealand. Used 1938 to Euro 1939 Ford commercial axles. The 2A had 1940 Ford truck axles. 2-pounder anti-tank gun carrier, the Carrier, anti-tank, 2PDR, or Carrier, 2PD. A tank attack was a heavily modified and lengthened LP2 carrier with a fully traversable QF 2-pounder anti-tank gun mounted on a platform at the rear and the engine moved to the front left of the vehicle. Stowage was provided for 112 rounds of 2PD ammunition. 200 were produced and used for training. 3-inch mortar carrier, the Carrier, 3-inch mortar was a design based on the 2-pounder carrier with a 3-inch mortar mounted in place of the 2-pounder. Designed to enable the mortar to have 360-degree traverse and to be fired either from the vehicle, or dismounted. 400 were produced and were ultimately sent as military aid to the Nationalist Chinese Army. Canadian variants Carrier, 2PDR equipped, Canadian modification to mount 2PDR gun. 213 used for training. Wasp MKIIC, Canadian version of the Wasp flamethrower variant. Windsor Carrier, Canadian development with a longer chassis extended 76 cm and an additional wheel in the aft bogie. United States variants T-16, the Carrier, Universal, T-16, Mark I was a significantly improved vehicle based upon those built by Ford of Canada, manufactured under Lend-Lease by Ford in the United States from March 1943 to 1945. It was longer than the Universal with an extra road well on the rear bogie. The engine was a Ford Mercury delivering the same power. Instead of the steering wheel controlling the combination brake warp mechanism, the T-16 had track brake steering operated by levers. During the war, it was chiefly used by Canadian forces as an artillery tractor. After the war, was used by Argentine, Swiss and Netherlands forces. German variants Vickers-Armstrong Bren, captured carrier of 1940, reused by the Germans and fitted with a 3.7 cm Pak 36 gun. Panzerjäger Currencygear Bren 731, Bren carriers captured by the Germans and fitted with a triple Panzerschreck transport rack. They were not fired from the Bren Gun Carrier, only transported. Italian variants Fiat 2800, in 1942, at the request of the Italian Army, Fiat produced a prototype carrier copied from a captured Universal carrier. It was known as the Fiat 2800 or CVP-4. It is uncertain whether production vehicles were manufactured. Bren carriers captured by the Italians in the field were often fitted with Breeder M37 machine guns. Variants of the Universal carrier have been used, among others, by the armed forces of the following countries. Pre-war and World War II, Australia, Canada, Czechoslovakia, 15 carriers received from USSR, Germany, Wehrmacht, Free Greece Forces, Italy, Regio Esercito, Nationalist China, 1,500 supplied from Australian production, New Zealand, United Kingdom, United States, 57 carriers en route for Canadian units in Hong Kong or in the Philippines when the Japanese invaded, 40 were operated by the 1st Provisional Tank Group. USSR, received 200, post-war, Argentina, French Expeditionary Corps in Indochina CEFEO, Israel, Germany, Bundes, Netherlands, Switzerland. Gallery. See also, C2P, Comschamalets armored tractor, Lloyd Carrier, M29 Weasel, Raupenschlepper Ost. Notes. References. Further reading, Watson, Nigel. Universal Carriers Volume 1, Dragon Armored MG Cavalry Scout AOP Bren Lloyd, Universal. Watson Books. ISBN 978-0955600906. Watson, Nigel. Universal Carriers Volume 2, Universal Mortar Medium Machine Gun T-16 Windsor Local Pattern Oxford Cambridge Flamethrowers Armored Snowmobile, Variants. Watson Books. ISBN 978-0955600913. Watson, Nigel. Universal Carriers Volume 3, Variants Parts Hull Details Restored, Project Vehicles and Rexa Euro Veteran Experiences. Watson Books. ISBN 978-09556920. External links: Universal Carrier Production and Technical Data, maplilifup.net. The Ford Universal Carrier, diggerhistory.info. Bren Carrier, Britain's carriers at livevehicles.com. 8th Army Bren Gun Carrier in the Middle East, 1941, Bren Gun Carrier with German machine gun in Gazala, Middle East, 1941, assembling Bren Gun Carriers in New Zealand, restored Bren Gun Carrier being driven by a collector in Australia, images of ex-Argentinian T-16 carriers for sale.